Reporting on the games you love by people who love to game. The MMO Reporter Network.
La 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 la.
You're listening to Too Long Didn't Listen on the MMO Reporter Network. Brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download at audibletrial.com/MMO Reporter. And by Doghouse Systems. Choose your weapon at doghousesystems.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Too Long Didn't Listen. This is episode number 75. We are going to deliver to you, the fine listeners, the finest listeners, really, two topics, 30 minutes, all on MMO and online gaming, and it's going to be fantastic. Joining me is none other than Mr. James Nichols. Hey, James, how you doing?
Hey, very good, very good. Good to be here again.
Excellent. I'm so glad you're here. And I am also joined by the Mr. of Misters, Mr. Brian Brushwood. How you doing, Brian?
Yeah, man. Look, you called them the finest listeners. I call them the fine-ass listeners.
Oh.
Hello, listeners.
I see what you did there. All right, so let's jump straight into it here. I want to talk about game streaming. The world is changing, as we've mentioned in previous episodes of TLDL, but in this case, it's changing in the way that games are being delivered to you. In the past, everyone had to have some kind of box that had varying levels of processing power, required a certain amount of know-how, either very much or very little, depending on whether you're working on a PC or an ancient Intellivision console or something in the middle. And that's changing now. People are starting to talk about delivering games over the internet and taking the whole hardware thing out of the equation, putting your processing in the cloud. And that's what I wanted to talk about here. So is this a good thing? Are we getting excited about being able to deliver a game to any screen that's in front of your face? Maybe not even a screen if we're going to start looking at the VR. What are those VR goggles again that are
Oculus
in the news?
Rift,
Thank
man.
you. I can't believe I forgot that.
1993.
So there you go. What do you think? The first thing that I wanted to mention here, the streaming device that kind of really captured my attention here is the NVIDIA Shield. Do you guys know the NVIDIA Shield at all?
I do not. I am familiar with the streaming that like the Steambox wants to do, where it's like all the horsepower is in your desktop system, but then you just stream it over to your Steambox.
Yeah.
But is that tied in on that technology?
It's really close to that. The NVIDIA Shield is basically like a little Android tablet that's got a game controller built right onto it, like a dual analog D-pad kind of thing. That's designed for basically driving. I mean, it can play your standard Android games and everything like that off the Google Play Store and that kind of thing. But the magic that it has is that it can actually stream games over Wi-Fi in your home that you play on your PC. I tried one of these out at PAX last year, and I was playing Dishonored on this device, just completely detached from everything. And it just captured my imagination as being just one of the coolest things ever. It's still a little screen. It's still obviously first-gen hardware and everything like that. But it was just awesome. So what do you think? Your entire Steam library in your hand with a controller that you can then throw in your pocket when you're done. What do you think?
Well, I mean, first of all, I assume this is all tied like over a LAN. It's not something you can stream over the internet or anything.
At this point, no. The big goal is to be able to put it over the internet, and that's like they're very upfront that that's the direction they want to go in. But as of today, I mean, we've seen with OnLive and that delivering that kind of thing over the internet is still very, very much in its infancy. But that's the ultimate goal.
And well, tell me a little bit about the controller itself. This is a fairly standard like Xbox-y type of controller?
Almost identical to an Xbox controller. Couple triggers, couple analog sticks. It's got a D-pad. It's got 4 buttons as well as your start select buttons in the middle. You would have thought that it was made for an Xbox.
So I mean, here's the thing: is I see the appeal of it. I see why I would absolutely go nuts for it if I weren't a grown-ass man who already could play whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. I think that's the biggest thing keeping me from being really excited about it. Although, hey, now this is interesting. I hadn't really considered this until just now. Part of the reason I'm drawn to PC gaming is because I got kids now and I like hyper violent video games. I like, tearing stuff up where they're shouting curse words and stuff. And when you got a 9, 6, and 1 year old, you don't get to do that in the living room without pissing off your lady. So this could be the kind of thing that would be a solution for that. But the fact that it would be streaming from a PC just tells me like, well, I could just go in that room and use the PC. I don't know where I'd need to use it. This seems like a great solution for a problem that I don't have personally.
So yeah, I mean, I could see, I personally, the Steam box or something like that, I could see myself using, because I do like playing in my living room. I do not have children, so I don't presently have to worry about those kind of considerations. But with it just being on hardware that's in my house, I think that's limited excitement for me as well. Where I really get interested is in that whole kind of combination of technologies that are evolving right now with cloud-based so could eventually all of that processing, all of the heavy lifting of generating that display to you, can that be done remotely somewhere by a large server structure? And then all you would have is just the display, the ability to display that and receive that data to that display. And then you could just play that game, and you'd have to have some kind of controller. Maybe you're playing on your iPad, your controller is your iPad or your phone, and your TV is just receiving another data signal.
This is
and
a
that's
great
how you're
point.
playing.
This is as a matter of fact, what this reminds me of is think of how silly these smart televisions look, right? Where they have underpowered hardware inside that they throw in a Samsung or whatever that makes for a miserable, super slow experience for loading your Netflix or watching YouTube videos. You'd much rather watch them on your Chromecast or your Xbox or whatever. And it's like, when I think of my television, I only want my television to do one thing, and that's display pictures beautifully, right?
Exactly.
How soon will this streaming technology make it to where you have a data center in the middle of your house? It's like you got your furnace, you got your hot water heater, and you got your data center. Yep. And then all of a sudden the idea of processing something as important as the display for your first-person shooter or your MMO, like the idea of running that on a separate console that's this weak underpowered thing that is from 2014 that's laughably slow compared to your data center, all of a sudden, like, all of your screens should be screen. In fact, I think you just convinced me with that point, James. I think that I'm a huge fan of the technology in general, and I don't. Wow, you just flipped me all around.
Well, I'm glad to be here and throwing out those different objective opinions on it. But yeah, I mean, I think it's an evolutionary thing. I think it's great that they're working on it. I don't think it's there for the mass consumers, but I think you're absolutely right. We are going to have a data center, some sort of data routing machine is going to just become the same thing as having a hot water heater or your electric panel. It's just going to be there. It's going to be installed with your house. And my thought on expanding on that even more is that you don't even have to worry about upgrading hardware anymore necessarily, because you're paying like some kind of service fee somewhere else, just like you're paying your water or your electricity, for them to just upgrade their hardware in wherever that remote area is, so that the data you're getting is just, it's able to run the most up-to-date services and programs.
So think about this, like the life cycle for the Xbox 360 was a full decade. So picture a full decade from now, it's 2024, and I guess imagine this if the successor to the Xbox or the PS5 or whatever was not hardware, but a service that you bought instead.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's where we are going. I think you're going to see hardware, and you're going to see what traditionally we had to buy hardware to get is now going to become a software service that utilizes hardware, because it's becoming really difficult to be a hardware manufacturer and a service developer. Like look, I think
People tend to be good at one or the other, or their
Exactly,
brand
yeah.
is.
You-
Yeah.
You saw that Google just jumped out of the whole phone business in order to concentrate on the services and the software and the operating system and that kind of thing when they dumped off Motorola to Lenovo. So it's out there for sure. And
And I'll tell you what, when I first saw that before we started here that we were talking about, streaming video games, I immediately thought of OnLive, the one that did essentially what we're talking about, but over the internet. And when I played it at E3, did you get a chance to ever play it, James?
I did, yeah. At, I think it was probably PAX or something like that.
I don't know about you, but for me, I was primarily very struck by the quality of the presentation. It really did look as though I was playing on a PC or whatever, but that ever so slight 5 to 15 milliseconds of lag really felt soupy, especially on a first-person shooter. And I remember thinking, like, they have a problem here. The speed of light is not fast enough to make this a good experience.
Yeah, and I think that's just a matter of, I don't know how fast this is going to become wireless like that. Like, I think there's a big leap there still. But
Well, and keep in mind, part of the reason I'm bringing it up is if so far in this discussion, we've acted like it makes sense in the local area networks of our home right now, where you have, we'll say 100 or 100 megabit, we'll say gigabit or whatever. And you mentioned Google focusing on services. Google Fiber is coming to Austin, Texas. And before they even got here, in anticipation, AT&T has already like 20-fold increased their speeds. I just now, while we were talking, I just got it last month. I'm still giddy, and pardon me while I brag a little bit. But I just ran a speed test, and it's 320 megabits, which is probably what my misconfigured home network is running out right now. So if it's good for the goose, good for the gander, I guess is what I'm asking. Is it the kind of thing where if this like you and I both had a less than satisfactory experience with OnLive, but we're saying that we believe in it for the home, 10 years from now, 5 years from now, you're telling me we're not going to have bandwidth to where maybe we believe that it will work over the internet?
I think
I hope that they are able to expand the infrastructure in large portions. I think it's a really difficult project, just physically updating all that infrastructure in these really highly dense, densely populated areas. There we go. That's what I was trying to get out. But I definitely think Google Fiber is a perfect example. I think the bandwidth is going to improve. I just hope that it doesn't slow down. That's my real concern right now. Is that there's a lot of monetary there's a lot of really high value decisions that need to be made by these companies that control that infrastructure. So I'm 5-10 years. That probably, but at least 20. I would say definitely.
Well, to put it in perspective, like I'm remembering what my internet bandwidth was in 2004. I think I was thrilled to have 10 megabits. And then I was thrilled even 2 years ago or 1 year ago to have 60 megabits. And then, obviously, we're an outlier here in Austin, but now, whereas 10, 15 years ago, I only had one choice of ISP. Now I've got 3 here in town. And then on top of that, wireless carriers and radio carriers and satellite carriers as well. It's not as much competition as we'd like, but there's enough that I'm starting to relax and think that it's going to work out for us as we start to think of internet as a service as important as telephone, electricity, or clean water.
And that's great that you have that much competition down there. And it's probably because Austin's infrastructure is possibly easier to update just because of the layout and topography of the area. But here where I live, south of San Francisco, I really only have I can get really bad quality AT&T Uverse. My cable, which is Comcast, which is just bogged down because everyone in my neighborhood's using the same lines, and I think I could get an alternative cable company. I think that's really it. I have no other options.
Well, keep in mind, I'm not saying it's great now, but compared to 10, 15 years ago, I mean, you don't have more choices now than you did then?
10, 15 years? Yeah, I mean, absolutely, I guess. Yes, totally. I do have more choices now, although I guess it's still just cable and DSL. So it's like
it's all
yeah,
just an
those are
illusion.
great. Those
I'm
are
just
like
kidding
great,
myself.
dude. That's so much better than my dial-up.
Yeah.
But it's still like
It's better
still
than
like the technology has existed. Fiber has existed for that's like getting on 30 years now. I think since fiber started being implemented, and it's just the sheer cost of it has really prevented it from becoming somewhere where it's that last mile that
Yeah.
makes it everything really difficult. So they've done pretty good jobs of keeping the major backbones and the other arteries and pipelines pretty up to date, but it's really that last mile where you lose most of the quality of your connection that's really
And that's changing so wildly right now. I mean, that you're even in the last 5 years, like gigabit network connections or LAN connection speeds were pretty amazing 5 years ago. Now we're starting to get into 10 gigabit Ethernet standards starting to come out. This is something that can only grow. And I mean, just talking about 10 years ago, my 2 bits there is I was thrilled to have a 3 megabit DSL connection 10 years ago. So
Yeah,
that's where we are now. But the infrastructure will grow. Maybe it's not a 10-year limit. Maybe it is 20 years or something like that. But there's going to come a point where the only thing the consumer is really bringing to the entertainment or the game entertainment game is the screen that they want to play on. So either your 100-inch LCD or your Google Glass or your Oculus Rift or whatever, that's what you're going to be bringing to the game, and it's just going to, whatever you want to play is just going to be there. I think this dedicated hardware it's going to become obsolete, and it's going to become a relic, like you were saying. Like, we're going to look back 20 years and say, why did you have that stupid box under your TV? It just seems like it's in the way.
An example to see, like a test case. Think about the journey we've watched for the last 20 years with MP3s. With MP3s, the moment that music became available to download, we all hoarded it like rats. We packed it all in. We loaded up our hard drive. Like, I've got so much music. How silly does that look now in a world where we have Spotify and Pandora and
Exactly.
and all these services to stream everything? Then, and same thing happens with video. We're seeing the transition now. We're seeing torrenting take a hit because it's so much easier to use Netflix now. You're like, why do I have to download it and then store it and keep it? Let me get a service. And now I'm telling you, games are going to be next. I think this is the way we're going.
Games are definitely, I agree. All media is gonna, because I think it's just human, right? Humans just kind of want the path of least resistance, even if that means we have to pay for it. Like, and that's really like what it comes down to is like, HBO doesn't provide me with a way to have a low resistance path to watching their content.
Yeah.
Ergo, I
and
have to bug my friends.
Yeah, no. HBO is kind of a different nut there because they enjoy the prestige of being so elite, and what they end up doing is creating a black market of their own accord. And they've publicly kind of flaunted it. Say like, hey, guess who's the most pirated thing out there? It's a compliment for us. But HBO is very entrenched in the old way of cable, so they can't do things like let you subscribe just to HBO directly without completely pissing off the old guard. So they're in a weird political space. But you're 100% right. We all want to buy HBO without bothering to buy the rest of the cable package.
Exactly. And that's really it. And it's like, well, sorry, HBO, I want to give you money. I have no problem with giving you money, but I can't give you money right now. So
there's
and
always got to be someone who's going to be that last hanger on to an old business model. And maybe it's going to be HBO in this case. Who knows? But for every company that's stepping forward and being proactive, like Valve and like OnLive and that kind of thing, you're gonna have a dinosaur that's just like trying to claw to their old way of making money as long as they possibly can.
You want to know? You already saw it, and you saw, to me, what was a tragedy in the most recent console unveiling. You saw two consoles come out. One essentially agreeing with everything we've said here, saying, yeah, we want to stream everything. We want you to be able to share a game virtually and then check it out and get it back. We want you to be able to play all the games that are licensed to you on whatever Xbox you want, and we're Xbox. And the PS4, PlayStation did a masterful job of spinning that vision into some bastardization. Like, oh, you don't want to be able to sell discs? Like, PS4 somehow perverted this this love fest for stupid physical media, stupid discs that I have to keep track of, stupid discs that get scratched and fall apart and break and get lost. And they won. They won that PR thing, and Microsoft caved. We're not going to get their vision, and we're stuck with stupid physical media.
And that kind of straw man politics can only last so long. I mean, Sony's obviously a machine. They have the dollars to drive that kind of propaganda and that kind of thing, but it can't last. People will catch on. The next generation is going to realize that that's just BS, and it'll fade over time. It's unfortunate that it happened this time, but I don't see it lasting.
I can't remember the specific details, but I do remember Microsoft kind of stumbled out the gate with that one.
Oh,
though,
no, they handled it. Yeah, and to be fair, Microsoft did an astonishingly poor job of representing their vision. What they should have said is, you guys like Steam? We're going to be Steam for consoles.
Exactly. And they should have come at it from a, this is good for you instead of why this is good for us.
Yeah.
You know, like, because that was really, like, I can't remember the specifics, but I just remember it's like, well, that's a little greedy, right? Like, it's like, I get it. I'd like to have a whole virtual library myself, but not when you're telling me that you're going to put all sorts of restrictions all over it, you know? So yeah, I think they kind of, you know, screwed the pooch on that one.
It was two things. It was PS4 being a bully, and it was Xbox being astonishingly tone deaf.
Yes, absolutely. I agree on all points.
So speaking of industry models that are starting to fade away into the past, let's talk a little bit about game journalism and how and what has changed in the dynamic of game companies reaching out to game media, who in turn reach out to the gamers. This is obviously a model of communication in the game industry that has it's maybe exists a little bit, but it's at best changed wildly, and at worst it's just completely died. So we're in an age now where we've got Twitch TV for showing everything that you want to see in a game. You've got Twitter for being able to send out really quick, easy messages straight from the source to your target. Where does journalism fit into this still? Like, where do the skilled writers and the researchers fit into this dynamic now?
So, James, are you a journalist?
I am not. I used to work on a fan site. That was about as journalism as I got. But no, I'm not a journalist.
Okay, I don't want to offend anyone who's a journalist, but I suspect that a lot of video games journalism existed as an artifact of a massive inefficiency between people who wanted to know what games to buy and the marketers of video games who wanted you to lay out, $60 of 1992 money at the time. And I think that what's happened is everything is so much more efficient. I used to subscribe religiously to PC Gamer magazine. I used to read all the reviews all the time. But lately, now I just follow all my favorite journalists. Like, journalism may be in a weird place, but I'm following all the journalists and getting their opinions directly. And then I just ask. They'll say something like, or Evan Lottie or Dan Stapleton or Logan Decker, any of these guys who were my favorite columnists on PC Gamer. I follow all of them, and they'll say something on Twitter about a particular game, and I'll ask, like, well, does that mean this or does that mean that? And they're like, oh, I mean like this. You should really do blah, 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 blah. That's the kind of thing a magazine could never do before. And I'm going to say that I'm getting a better, higher fidelity experience now than I did when my only way to learn was by subscribing those years and years ago.
Yeah, I would say, honestly, there's definitely still a place for game journalism. But I think it needs to steer more towards larger, more long-term kind of looks at the industry, the people making the games, and not so much as just reporting what these games are doing themselves. I mean, that's always just going to be a basic part of a news site, is just like the day's news. But I think what I've seen less of lately, on major journalism, on gaming news sites, that I've seen on independent blog sites, is just these more kind of in-depth looks at and introspectives at, you know, the games that are coming out, you know, some of the business decisions, the human decisions behind making them, how that impacted, you know, their ultimate release or non-release or whatever. Because I think there's a lot of discussion there about these games, but I think people still have a kind of it's a very non-transparent view of the whole process itself. Whereas if you look at other, you know, fields of journalism, you know, they're talking about the actual businesses themselves. And you do see that in, like, there's actual, like, gaming business news that you can read, you know, gaming, Game Biz. But
you know what it's kind of like is number one, we did kind of already see this with the rise of the blogosphere, and I guess this is just another branch of that entire transformation where all of a sudden somebody who would never have a chance in a million years to get into the journalism business on their own, sitting in some small town with only 100 people in South Dakota or whatever, they've got an internet connection, and they've got, as a matter of fact, you know, one of my favorite live stream channels to watch is Man versus Game, and he's a guy in a very small town up in one of those northern states who it's like he would never get the chance to wield the kind of power he does in the traditional journalism architecture. And in some ways, it reminds me of, if you've ever gone to a city where you might have had to hail a cab, but instead you now have the opportunity to experience the sheer joy that is using Uber. Like, I imagine that Uber upsets a lot of cab drivers. They're talking about the death of the cab industry, and or Lyft, you know, same thing. I think that's what we're seeing with journalism with a capital J. I think now we're just seeing lowercase journalism.
Yeah, I think that the journalism with a capital J, as you put it so eloquently, needs to do a better job of giving really insightful pieces, like really, you know, research oriented pieces, rather than just, oh, well, here's my general opinion about, you know, this random game. Because, you know, the reality is, like I don't really, like, I can go talk to 20 different people who've played that game too,
right,
and get their general opinion about it.
So
I don't really care that much what you think about the game. What I'd like to know is things that I can't find out on my own, that I'm not spending 8 hours a day of my life learning and looking into and you know, writing about.
So what's changed then? Obviously, the way that we're getting the game news now is we're actually looking for the people we want to listen to, like rather than the source or the brand name. Like, again, a PC Gamer, for example, instead of going to that source, you're looking for the people that you want to get that opinion from, or the people that present the information in the most appealing way to you. So it almost seems like the qualifications to be a games journalist have changed, or it used to be that you'd need research skills, you'd need some tenacity, you need to be a bit of a jerk to be able to dig a little deeper and find out something that's not just in the press release or that kind of thing. That's not really so much the case now. So if it's not those skills, because I mean, those skills actually might not be very appealing. That might not be a person you actually like. Here's the thing. What's the qualifications now?
This is a good point in that, you know, you're not wielding the resources of a Condé Nast or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But truthfully, again, those people interested in getting to the bottom of things, of piecing things together, still exist. And those well-researched articles still exist. And they're done, you know, at a fraction of the cost. And no, they don't have the marketing budget. But here's the thing. You know, PC Gamer is the brand, right? But now I follow the people, and I might not know who wrote this article, but I guarantee you one of those people that I follow on Twitter or on Facebook or on Google Plus, one of them will see it on their radar and will share it and offer their insights on it. And I will be connected to it just as quickly, probably faster than if I had waited for it to come out in my favorite magazine.
Yeah, and I think that's just a perfect example of where I think things are going to be headed, especially if we don't see that. I think there's a real lack of motivation on a lot of degrees, because I think game companies have done a very kind of poor job in some degrees of working with the press. Because here's the thing: if a press guy if a journalist wants to get uppity about a studio's certain project, that studio can just not ever invite that company, that publication, that individual to any event ever again. And there's
Well, and
not much you can do about it. And when that happens, especially for a large publisher, then you're essentially just you're out of work.
And,
You
well, and
know?
think about
So,
this, right? If you're a magazine and somebody screws it up for your magazine, that's nothing but a loss, right?
yep.
But if you're an individual and you've got nothing to hide, so you go in, you do hidden camera, you ask the tough questions, you watch them evade or whatever, you go and do it. And you know you've now permanently burned your relationship with EA, but also you know that you have now made internet gold. There's a vast amount of benefit waiting for you if you could do something that will really piss off a company if it gets to the truth. And at that point, you could write your own ticket. You could get hired by one of the big wigs, because journalism, again, hasn't gone away. It's just become a smaller, much more elite island. And the way you get there
Yes.
is with exceptional citizen journalism beforehand.
Yeah, and I think that's I think that's really where it's going. I think what we're seeing is the kind of the daily news reporting is going to just more move into like we were talking about before with Twitch and everything, where you're going to just engage with other people through Twitter, through Twitch, through Facebook, Instagram, whatever the hell you're using. And you're just learning from your peers what's good, what they're up to, whether or not you should, and you can see for yourself now even whether or not it's something that you like. And most games are even now allowing, like, people are streaming games before they're even released because they realize how much, just free marketing potential that can give them. So it's like a whole new interesting world. I don't think journalism's dying, but I totally agree with you, Brian, that it is definitely becoming real capital J journalism is a much smaller and highly competitive island to get onto, versus now you can, the real kind of nitty gritty investigative or just kind of authentic journalism that you would think of when you think of a guy in his trench coat with his notepad. And he's the blogger now today, I guess.
So
Yeah.
So if the notion that journalism, like that hard journalism, that really digging deep is riskier now, like in terms of like the notion that there's a risk for that companies just won't want to deal with your publication anymore because they don't need that publication as badly because they have a lot of other avenues that they can drive themselves. There used to be the phrase, any publicity is good publicity. Is that kind of dead now that there's absolutely no scarcity of publicity anywhere?
I mean, you can definitely I think that it used to be any publicity is good publicity. And I still think that's probably the case. Like, name recognition is just huge for marketability. And like, people will remember your name because of the horrible stuff you did without remembering the horrible things you did. That's just kind of unfortunately how our brains work sometimes. But I think there's way more potential blowback nowadays. At least for the immediate effects of having a negative issue impact your company. And it really depends on the whole extent of what the issue was, I think. But I think with the size of the megaphone and how you can't control that funnel so well, that's just there's a real potential damage there to your image if you're not careful.
And that's one of the things is it used to be part of the reason they said that there's no such thing as bad publicity is because the alternative was no publicity or nothing at all. And it used to be that you could bully media outlets and journalists and there was backroom deals or whatever. And nowadays we've seen some spectacular instances of this blowing up in video games companies' faces when they try to use those tactics. And nowadays it turns out that the best strategy is to be honest, which is freaking great.
Yeah, and that's the internet is the great democratizer, as they say, and I think that's the truth. I think it's going to be an arduous and sometimes messy process, but I think so long as it remains a neutral, open, ground for discussion and social interaction, then we'll continue to see this kind of equilibrium develop that we're seeing right now. It's pretty cool, in my opinion.
Well, guys, I think we have officially destroyed and brought back to life game journalism in this episode here. We've totally destroyed the old model, and then we painted it with the new brush, and now real journalists are saints and scholars, and we love them all. And we did it in just over 30 minutes. So I got to get my checkbook now. That's
All right.
great. So anyway, guys, thanks very much for another awesome Too Long Didn't Listen episode here. James, you're a scholar and a gentleman.
You as well, Bill, and including your curling endeavors.
Well, thank you very much. And Brian, you're a gentleman and a scholar. Thanks so much for coming out with us.
You, sir, are a hobo and a ham bone artist.
I will take that as a compliment. Have a great night, guys, and we will see you next time on episode 76.